Hi everybody, my name is Samuel Ben. I'm the English trader to the Cherokee. Just down the river here at Tanasi is where I'm based out of. I had a license to South Carolina to do trade with the Cherokee. And mainly what I'm here to get are some deer pelts from the Cherokee. And we have a lot of things they want from us. So if y'all would like me to, I can just kind of go down the line here. So right behind you have the deer pelts. This is what was commonly wanting to use, and what they use, they'd get the deer pelts, bring them back to South Carolina, process them, and they'd bring them back over in this kind of suede leather. This would be good for making gloves and fine clothing like that. So this is what we were wanting then. Y'all are probably familiar with the fur trade that happened later with beaver pelts. Those were for fur felt hats. We were wanting the actual leather. So what I would ask our Cherokee friends to do, bring me your pelts, and I have a whole slew of goods that I could trade with them. Some of the most popular things with the Cherokee were trade knives. Trade knives are extremely popular. It was an iron or steel edge that they could use. This is indicative of an English trade knife. And yes, the French had their own style of trade knife. It was a little bit more sloping in the front than our English trade knives. These were made very cheaply. I could go to a blacksmith in South Carolina, buy these knives very inexpensively, and I could trade these for a pretty penny here on the frontier. Another thing they were also wanting were muskets. Now this isn't exactly the English trade musket you'd be seeing. This is more common with like the French. This is a fusil de chasse. It's been cut down short, a little bit more handy out here in the woods. And you can't have your musket without your powder and ball. So they'd come in, bring their pelts, and prices varied. Have you all familiar with the slang term for $1, a buck?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of that verbiage started in this time period because that deer skin was the currency that they were using, and you could gauge it off how many bucks you're getting in. And once again, not to be being prejudiced against our does out there, the does had a thinner skin. And were a little harder to process. So those winter bucks had a really thick hide, and they were good for that. And also the summer bucks were a little thinner, just because they weren't all fattened up. But going down our trade table here, we also have some belt axe heads. This is a French style belt axe head, and we have more common with the English. And you see the hammer in back. So this is a very utilitarian tool. This one, however, its only purpose is as a weapon. This is a weapon to fight with.
Oh, okay.
You by all means, you could chop down some branches and wood, but here's another one, a much smaller one. This has been very handy and easy to use. You see in the movies where they're throwing tomahawks. That wasn't happening. This is a very expensive tool for you. You don't want to lose it and throw it. You're much better to keep it on your person.
I had purchased a reproduction of one of the French axes. I didn't know it was just a weapon. I thought it was more of a camp tool.
Well, I mean, by all means, when you're on the frontier, anything can be a tool. But this was more or less a weapon. You'll see the soldiers walking around. They have their musket, and they also have a sword. It's called a hanger. Depending on where you were and what supply lines were around, you could either be issued a hanger or a belt axe. So that was something you'd see a lot too. Going down the line, once again, the Cherokee weren't just out to go kill everything, okay? They also were wanting some finer things. I have some tobacco, which would have been around here. I got some shears for cutting fabric. You can see over here on this back table some different trade fabrics. They'd be using for shirts, breech cloths, things of that nature. So I have a mirror. Now this one's broken, so it's a little bit of bad luck. But once again, imagine being someone who's never seen their actual image and being able to actually look at that. So this was very popular as well. Once again, if you're wanting to make all your fabric, you're going to have your thread. The Cherokee were making their own clothing pre-contact with the English. Leather and very heavy different textiles that were not like what we have now. So to be able to use this fine cloth was really nice for them to have. And you would think, once again, this is a thimble. We know what thimbles are. We still use them today. But Cherokee saw some other use in this as well. We've dug up a lot of these with holes drilled in the top. And the best we could think of this was being used was as clothing ornamentation. Bells and got these little silver earrings here on these trade beads. It'd be used as jewelry.
Okay.
So the Cherokee were making a lot of things from jewelry. Like for instance, this kettle. This is super light. This is super potable. You can bring food in this. Carry water. This is much different than the clateware that the Cherokee were using. Much lighter, not as going to break as easy. Very durable. The Cherokee were cutting out little bits and pieces for ornamentation as well on this. And also, there is evidence that later on they were using this as a quick, rough and dirty arrowhead, cutting these out. Also, I have trade beads. Trade beads have been used for a long, long time, and all the way up into the 1800s, they were still being used up north. So I have a selection of different trade beads. Some here are glass beads, but some of them are kind of the beads that you have seen the Cherokee already having. This is made out of quahog shell. You might have heard of wampum. Very much the same thing. So they were getting these shells and working them into a bead. But right here, right beside it, I have glass beads that are made to emulate that wampum, that quahog shell. But also I have some other different very popular trade beads that the Cherokee would have been interested in. Not at this time period in per se. A little earlier on, Native Americans were really interested in copper and brass jewelry as well. But at this time, when I'm trading with the Cherokee, silver's king. They were wanting silver. They were wanting to put these little brooches, on their clothing. I got a couple different styles. I have this little heart here, a weeping heart. That's what it's called. It was very popular with Cherokee. And also I have this round little washer style brooches as well. And you'd see a lot of times men and women both, their clothing would be covered in it. It was a sign of wealth, a sign of power. And for me, as a trader, I would also like to be wearing a lot of silver as well. There's accounts of Cherokee or other Native Americans attacking settlers, and if you're a wealthy person, you might not be killed because you could be ransomed off later on. So it's a good way to get home too. Also right here I have a gorget. During the time of medieval knights, this would be part of a suit of plate armor. It was that part that protected the neck. And later on, as plate armor became not popular, as you can see here in the fort, no one's wearing plate armor because of the invention of muskets. We're defeating that armor quite easily. But this gorget still stood for a sign of an officer. And for the Cherokee, someone of great importance. So I also have these different gorgets of different sizes to trade with the Cherokee. Back onto our clothing here real quick. These I think are very neat. These are representations of needles the Cherokee would have had access to pre English contact. These are fine for working leather, things like that, but they're not really great for textiles. This steel or iron needle I would be trading with the Cherokee as well. So something you probably noticed in all these things here I've not really introduced anything necessarily new to the Cherokee, just new materials that are maybe a little bit more convenient, a little bit more easy. For instance, one of my favorite things on this table is this red powder here. The Cherokee warriors, when they would go out for battle, would paint their bodies black and red. That black would be usually soot from a campfire. The red was red ochre, which is like a mineral deposit, kind of like similar to red clay. You could dig up and mix with bear grease into a paint. Well, I can have this. You don't have to go look for that red ochre. You can just get this. This is a pretty high content of lead and red mercury in this.
So it's really
to give it a really vibrant red color. So once again, we didn't know that stuff back then, but that was also a very popular trade item with Cherokee, different pigments like that. Just curious, y'all may be familiar with this item. You may not be.
Well, we saw it in the visitor center.
You did?
Yeah.
So you already know what it is.
Oh yeah.
Okay, usually I get people, they'll scratch their head and go, oh, I don't know what this thing is. I ask them to scratch it, sniff, taste if you're brave. But yeah, this is a block of tea, and this is the way we were transporting tea for a very, very, very long time. And still today, obviously, we can buy this tea now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on the internet. The internet's a great thing.
I'm really curious how it tastes now.
But yeah, this is Chinese tea. There were different types of tea that the English would have had. In the barrels, we have some pigtail tea, I believe, somewhere out here, and bohea tea. But this is very similar to what you would have had on Frontier. It's very good. I could figure out how many pieces you would want to purchase, and you bring it home and shave it into your hot water steep like you do any other normal tea. And here's a box in case you're needing a hint for the East India Trade Company talking about tea. I want to say I covered just about everything here. Is there any questions you guys have about anything else? I'd love to answer, or at least try to answer them the best I can.
Well, I'm curious about the reason why, if you were trading, like, you know, like bartering with the like leather and hide, like what would you use the scales for?
The scales, once again, they weren't always just bringing this in. You know, once again, trade is trade. They came in with some of their silver brooches. I could use this scale to weigh the silver weight.
Okay.
I know what what I got here. I got a shilling here. So I know what the silver weight of a shilling is. So I can use their silver and weigh that out to match my silver and figure out the value so they can get these other items as well, and not just have used deer skins. Most of the time you were dealing with deer skins though.
Okay.
And that's what the Cherokee were working with. There's a story, actually, Mr. John Elliott, who was known as a bit of a rough trader, not necessarily the most honorable man, promising some Cherokee for so many deer skins that they'd be paid in rum, which was a big no-no. It was something that they strictly were saying do not do. And he's like, okay, I got all this rum for you. It's at the fort. And Cherokee come to the fort looking for rum, and there's not. And you know, we've had letters from Paul Demeray, not painting Mr. Elliott in the best light until he helped us. You know, here at the fort, he actually was one of the traders that helped get all the heavy guns over the mountains on horseback. So he gained a little bit more favor with the fort, which kind of saved him from any issues with the Cherokee. But once again, those bad traders still made the Cherokee very, very upset, and they were being, you know, mistreated. On top of that, there were Cherokee getting killed, or their horses were being killed in war, and in their culture, that means that they needed to seek, you know, revenge on the whites that did that, or their horse was killed. Then the English owed them horse, and they didn't see the difference between, you know, this settler has no attachment to this fort out here. You're English. You're part of the same tribe, if you will. And that made settlers upset. That killed more Indians, and Indians were killing more settlers. And until the point that Cherokee, the great war chief, Attakullakulla, no, I'm sorry, I misspoke, Oconostota, was really ready to wage war on the English and was kind of stoking the fires of war. And once again, good traders like myself, Samuel Ben, weren't necessarily able to stave off that kind of conflict. And the whole point of doing trade with the Cherokee was to build relations, because our French enemies were trying to gain the same favor through the Cherokee, allegedly. So I hope I haven't been rambling too much for you guys.
No, we're enjoying this.
Y'all have, you know, something else I hadn't spoke on yet.